right, thank you. Call the committee of the whole meeting for Monday, April 4th, 2022 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gafino.
Here.
Trustee Carroll.
Here.
Trustee Curtis. Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Lowry.
Here.
Trustee Nedved.
Here.
Trustee Salazar. Here.
All right, thank you. Audience comments? Trustee comments? Okay, item 1, discussion. Steve?
Thank you. Item number 1 is the Seasons North Aurora apartment complex that's looking to go in off Orchard Road. This has been to the Plan Commission. It was viewed by the Committee of the Whole already, and this is another review by the Committee of the Whole. Mike would like to take us through this.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Everyone knows the general location of the property, west of Orchard Road, south of West Moose Harbor Road, and east of Deer Path. It is the 260 unit apartment complex. That's going to be 13 two-story buildings with 20 units each building. The northern portion of the property has rights to the R4 zoning, which allows multifamily residential as a permitted use. As Steve mentioned, on March 1st, 2022, the Plan Commission public hearing was held with a favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission. We came back before the village board at the March 7th Cal meeting. The actual developer at that point in time has actually arranged to provide alternate clubhouse locations, as that was one of the comments that derived from the Plan Commission meeting, was the location being too close to the residences to the west. So they came back with an alternate location. The village board at that time was supportive of the alternate location and the overall development. The village board did discuss the desire to create a public pedestrian sidewalk network. And I'm going to show the site plan here in a second, but the developer has agreed to put access easements around the perimeter walkways in the development, thus opening it to the public. And here's the current site plan. As you recall, the clubhouse was moved a little bit to the south, and you can see some of the perimeter walkways and sidewalks in the area. Again, those would become public through the public access easement. The developer also submitted the full traffic impact study, which was submitted with the board packet. All the conclusions came back good. The area road network can, for the most part, handle all of the impact from the development and the additional traffic. I think it was pages 24 through 28 of the report itself had a lot of conclusions and recommendations that went intersection by intersection. Some signalized intersections further away from the property, maybe at Oak and Orchard, some closer. Tanner Orchard, White Oak and Orchard Road. All those intersections were reviewed, and they all came back that the additional traffic would not have a bearing on those intersections. So the full study is in the packet for review. And some of the next steps would be, there are 2 actionable items that the board is going to be asked to vote on. It would be the amendment to the annexation agreement, and also the ordinance approving the special use, which is amending the original special use that was approved in 2013. And again, what those documents include are, accommodations for the site plan approval, the preliminary plat of subdivision, the deviations that were discussed at the last meeting, regarding the enclosed parking spaces, the parkway tree locations, the landscape buffer, and how the development plans are processed. And also too, it includes all the conditions that are approval that came from staff and the Plan Commission. So that concludes my presentation. I don't know if the developer has anything to comment on, or answer any questions you might have.
No, I think it looks really nice. It fits our community. So I'm pleased with this development myself.
Yeah, everything looks good to me. Thanks, guys.
Mark?
Looks good.
Thank you.
Laura?
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Carolyn?
Yeah, I like it.
Yep, looks good. Thank you, guys.
And if you have any comments too, we did include the drafts of the annexation amendment and also the PUD ordinance. We'll be bringing that back for final consideration.
All right, thank you. Item 2. Steve?
Item number 2 is our draft budget presentation. At the last Committee of the Whole meeting, we had our budget overview. It's not that much different. It's just a little more beefed up, so to speak, with a little more detail, but it's essentially, this is an overview of our entire draft budget at this point. After this meeting, if there are any questions, we'll obviously try to answer them tonight. And then the next step would be, it would go back to Committee of the Whole 2 weeks from now, in case there's some questions you don't think of tonight that maybe you think of over the next 2 weeks, and then we'll give another shot to review it then. And with that, Jason is going to present.
All right. Thank you.
right, so I'm going to start off with the summary of all the funds that make up the budget. Total revenues, about 26.5 million across all funds. Expenditures came in at 35.2 million, so for a decrease of 8.7, but these numbers will change next time. I'll bring back new numbers because these do include the most recent bid for the water tower. So we'll pull all the water tower related expenditures out of the budget and give you a new updated summary at the next meeting. Just really quickly, some highlights. General fund, we are budgeting a $54,000 increase. This increase does include a $600,000 transfer to the capital projects funds for some surplus money. So we are able to continue that trend for next year's budget. The big decrease in the Route 31 TIF fund is just sending $750,000 over to the United TIF fund to establish that fund. So we're kind of splitting those two out. Capital projects, $3.3 million decrease. A lot of that is capital related to the annual roads program and some other planning for the public works facility upcoming. Waterworks, obviously, the big decrease there relates to that water tower. So that will get updated and be more closer to a $1.3 million decrease. We do have some improvements in the budget that is driving a lot of those decreases. And in the vehicle and equipment fund, a lot of that decrease relates to essentially vehicles and equipment that were budgeted in this current year's budget, but for whatever reasons, didn't receive vehicles on time, things got delayed. So we're kind of rebudgeting that along with the new stuff. So we're seeing a lot of the decrease there is just things piling up in that fund. Just a quick overview of all the revenues that make up the 26.5 million. Largest revenue, obviously sales tax. So this includes sales tax, the 1% portion, the 3% cannabis tax, and the 0.5% non-home rule sales tax. Just over $7.8 million. So it's down a little bit from the current year projections. Mainly, we're just suggesting that maybe some of the the car sales and things that have jumped these last couple of years are going to come back down to normal. I've got a slide that kind of details that a little bit later.
Jason,
Yes.
I was looking at this earlier, and I'm just curious, what are other taxes? What is that comprised of?
So my next bullet point I was going to cover, we'll cover that.
Oh, okay, great.
So second largest group, mainly income tax, use tax, replacement tax, utility. So that's the gas, electric, telecommunications, amusement tax, video gaming. So basically every other tax that doesn't fall into that property tax or sales tax. So, but of that, the largest piece is pretty much the income tax portion. So we'll get into that a little bit later as well. And the property tax, the third biggest revenue. That's based on the 2021 levy that was passed, I think, late last year. And expenditures by type. Largest expense in this budget would be capital, but that'll change to personnel once we pull that water tower out. Total budget expenditures are up about $5.9 million from last year. Again, a lot of that carryover from capital is coming into this year, as well as the new stuff that we're planning for the current year. Personnel, we covered this last time, but just want to cover it again. Within the budget, there are 4 new positions under consideration: an HR generalist, civil engineer, part-time IT assistant, and then taking one of the police record specialist part-time positions and moving that to a full-time position. Pay adjustments currently in the budget: non-union staff 3%, public works 2.75%, police sergeants 3%, and then the officers' contract expires at the end of this fiscal year. So they'll be starting negotiations shortly. Health insurance, HMO plan, seeing about a 1.1% decrease. The PPO and high deductible plan, about a 4.9% increase. Dental insurance, HMO plan, 2% increase, and PPO 5% increase factored in the budget. The police pension contributions, $1,443,000. So that was based off of the most recent actuarial evaluation done. And then IMRF, so for the pension plan for all the non-public safety employees, we're assuming the rate at 11.31% of gross salary, which comes out to about $364,000. Here's just a quick breakdown of the personnel staffing last year versus this year. So last year we were at 67.3 FTEs, up to 70.45. Those differences would be adding 1 for the civil engineer, going up 0.65 for taking that police records position from a part-time to a full-time, adding 1 for the HR generalist and a 0.5 for the IT assistant. Really quickly, in the police pension funding, we did see an increase from 59.4% to 63.3% funding. The village has made additional contributions to the pension fund above and beyond what the actuary has said for the years of 2014 to 2021, totaling 750 total. Those have kind of varied anywhere from about 17,000 extra to 250,000 extra, just depending on how much money is available to fund. Net pension liability has dropped from 13.5 million from the last valuation to 12.9 million. But again, that number kind of fluctuates year by year based on how the investments are doing, any changes within the plan, but it's definitely going in the right direction. You see back up to 63% funded. And then that covers 32 sworn employees. The other pension plan, IMRF. So the only difference here is this is on a IMRF reports on a calendar year, whereas the village's fiscal year is not on the calendar year. So some of these numbers might not match when I said, projected $300,000 for 2022 calendar versus our village's fiscal year. It's just kind of how they're reported. IMRF, as of our last valuation, December 31st, 2021, it is basically 100% funded. But again, this is one of those ones that we might look at it next year and it might be 97%. It just kind of fluctuates year by year, again, based on how their investments are doing. We are projecting, as I said, a 11.3% rate on gross salaries. Currently, we're at 10.75. So we're projecting it to go up a little bit next year. It may stay the same, may actually go down depending on how their investments do. Village's debt. So currently I have two outstanding obligations, the police station bonds, which end January 1st, 29, and then the water bonds, January 1st, 32. As of the end of this current fiscal year in May, we'll have $8.1 million of outstanding debt. Here's just a quick summary on the village's general fund. So the expenditures here do include all expenditures and transfers out to the capital projects fund. The village has made a number of additional transfers to the capital fund over these last few years. Looking at years 19, 20, and 21, a total of $4.3 million. Currently in the projected 2022 numbers, we have an additional $2.3 million of surplus revenues going to the capital fund. And then, as I mentioned, 600,000 budgeted in this current budget. So you add all those five together, I mean, it's an additional $7.2 million going from general to capital to help fund a lot of these capital projects that we have lined up. So here's a quick history of the general fund's fund balance. So the fund balance has been going up, but we see that red line, the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, has been going down. And the reason it's been going down is how I mentioned, with a lot of that surplus money, rather than it sitting in the general fund and boosting up that fund balance has kind of stayed about the same these last couple of years, maybe increasing a little bit. So as the budget's going up and fund balance is kind of staying the same, we're seeing that line go down. Had that money not gone into capital or some of it stayed within in the general fund, you'd see that red line going the opposite way, and we'd be building a reserve much higher than it is currently. The village's policy is 40 to 50% of expenditures and transfers, so we're above that policy. But if we decide that maybe we want to go a little back up to that 60%, things like that could help with future bond ratings, get better interest rates on borrowing money. So when we come back with the $2.3 million, we might decide maybe it's a little bit less. So let's keep some of that money in the general fund and kind of get those reserve levels up again.
Jason kind of hit it on the head. We've had a practice for the last several years. That 60% number is, for whatever reason, that's the number that we've always felt for bond agencies and whatnot is a good number to keep in our fund balance. So as Jason explained it perfectly, it really comes down to how much we want to transfer out at the end of the year. We know we'll have money to transfer to the capital fund. We just have to adjust it accordingly to keep our fund balances steady in the general fund, but also put money into future capital projects.
All right, now getting into some of the general fund revenues, sales tax. So this include the sales tax and the 3% cannabis tax, budgeted at $6.5 million in this upcoming year. That is down about 4.1% versus what we're seeing or projecting to come in for this this calendar year or this fiscal year 22. And again, some of it is just being conservative, just saying, a lot of these car sales we're seeing and things that have really been driving kind of this post-COVID business closures and shutdowns. People are getting out spending money. Maybe some of that starts to come back a little bit. I mean, just following the trend line of the sales tax revenue, a lot of it started basically that COVID shut down people buying money. Then there's the recreational marijuana sales in early 2020. The village's 3% kicked in July 1st. So we've got a lot of things affecting revenue. Again, we'll get into it a little bit. The use tax switch to where a lot of things used to run through use tax, and now they're running through the destination-based sales tax. So a lot of the purchases from Amazon and eBay and that are now the village is getting the direct 1% rather than part of that formula for the per capita that use tax was going through use tax. So talking about use tax, you can see the history of use tax kind of starting in 2018 when those whole Wayfair cases, when a lot of those online retailers started having to charge use tax on purchases. You can see starting in 19, then the village was seeing 16, 17, 18% increases year over year in use tax revenue coming in. Then once they started the Leveling the Playing Field Act in 21, you kind of saw that drop in 10% drop immediately in use tax revenue, as a lot of that money that was coming in as use tax is now coming in as sales tax. So, use tax we're projecting to be down from these past couple of years that we're at, but still $690,000. So we should see it start coming in, similar to how we've seen it this current fiscal year. Income tax has probably the most fluctuation, and a lot of that fluctuation is either based on the economy and the way things are. A lot of what we're seeing now is attributed to strong corporate tax returns, better than expected in individual tax returns, and strengthening job market. The one thing over the history of this revenue is there's a lot of influence by the state of Illinois and what their budget does. Even going back to the state's 2018 budget year, they decided to take 10% off of the local share. So that lasted 1 year. The state's 2019 and 2020 budget, they reduced it 5%, and then they went back to the full funding for their 21 and 22 budgets. So this is one of those revenues that from year to year could switch depending on if the state wants to take any away from the local funds, or if they want to, let the local funds have their full portion. We are expecting it to go down a little bit next year, but still at fairly high levels. And I will say this revenue projection, Illinois Municipal League kind of puts out their per capita projections as what they think and what they're seeing, and they think that the local governments will get. So we're basing this projection off of kind of the numbers they're getting and what their economists are seeing. Property tax revenue. We have been seeing a steady increase in property tax revenue coming into the village, and actually the tax rate has been going down. So a lot of that you'll see on the next slide relates to the EAV, but the 2021 estimated extension, $2,375,000 for the general purposes. Within that, 947 is approximately general services, whereas $1.4 million is for the police pension, a part of the levy.
I have a question on that one.
Oh, yeah.
So looking at the trend line, you're saying that because the EAVs have been going down, we've seen a decrease in revenue. But haven't we also added a significant amount of rooftops at Lincoln Valley to offset that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Haven't we added a significant amount of homes at Lincoln Valley to offset the decrease in EAV?
No, I'm sorry, the EAV has been going up. So the revenue and the EAV are going up, even though the tax rate's going down. So on this next one here, so here's basically our EAV over the last 10 years has been on a steady increase since 2013. The residential 462 million, up 2% from the following year, from last year's valuation. Commercials up 97 million, up 5%. The residential, going back to 2013, the residential was at 337 million. Now we're at 462 million. So we're seeing a steady increase year over year on a growing EAV within the village. And then some other items within the general funds budget. I think we discussed these last time. village tree inventory, bridge repairs on Orchard Gateway and Oak Street, updating of the village's comprehensive plan, contracted police social worker. Currently, they're there for 1 day. We're proposing to increase that to 3 days a week. We have some technology improvements, basically moving things from in-house servers to more of a cloud-based servers. Vehicle and equipment fund charges $360,000. So this is to buy the new equipment in the vehicle. The various departments share of funding future purchases. And then, as we mentioned, $600,000 transfer from general fund to capital. And again, this is, so we kind of consider this an up to $600,000. So for whatever reason, if revenues come in short, or there's some other unforeseen expenditure, something happens in the general fund, we can safely go up to 600, but if it becomes 200, if it becomes 100 or nothing, we have that kind of money to, go other places if need be. Next major fund, the capital projects fund. If you see those blue bars is the revenues of these past couple of years. That relates to those transfers that I mentioned earlier of money going into the fund. Now in the current year, we're seeing that $5.8 million. The expenditures primarily driven by the road improvement project, and then planning work starting with the public works building that will be in the future. The non-home rule sales tax kind of follows a similar path as the sales tax did, maybe just not as drastic because of auto sales not being charged to 0.5% of non-home rule sales tax. But again, we're budgeting it at 1.2 million, down slightly, 4% from the current year projections.
Hey, Jason, can you go back 2 slides to the revenue and expenditures?
This one.
I just have a question about 22, 23. It seems like it's flipping. Our expenditures are 2 or 3 times higher than our revenues.
Yeah, so the revenues the past 2 years were kind of those one-time transfers from the general fund. So if you kind of look at I would say around 2.2 to 2.5, I would call normal revenues, between maybe even a hair less than that. Your non-home rule sales tax and the utility tax money coming in. So the transfers kind of to skew those revenue numbers, but on the expenditure side, there were a lot of things that were kind of put on hold or kind of rebudgeting, that things that were part of the 22 budget that we didn't get to, or we're kind of moving to the next year. So it's really kind of unspent money from the previous year, kind of getting rebudgeted to the current year. So it kind of skews it to looks like gigantic increases.
So the surplus that we're looking at in 2021, 21, 22 is basically being rolled over into the expenditure. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
So then the second major revenue piece of the capital projects fund, utility tax, now it's made up of the gas tax and electric tax. Previously, there was a piece of the telecommunications tax coming into this fund. But a couple of years ago, the village took that 4% that was split 2.5% to the general, 1.5% to the capital, and made it all within the general. So telecommunications tax no longer comes in to fund capital projects. Gas and electric tax, again, fluctuates, by weather, by a number of things year to year. So we're projecting some very similar numbers of what we see in the past couple of years.
For clarification, that's not a motor gas tax, that's natural gas.
Yeah, sorry. And then some other major expenses. I did mention a lot of these were carried over. The public works facilities, some site analysis, architectural fees, construction management. These were things that appeared in last year's budget that we're rebudgeting. So this kind of unspent money from the previous year, which is driving a lot of that increase in budget this year. Annual road program engineering, Orchard Gateway, phase 1 and 2 engineering, Riverfront Park engineering costs. And then on the capital side, the $3 million annual road project, Chestnut, Locust, Spruce road improvements, which will relate to a water main improvement project that we'll have in a slide or two, and then some Riverfront Park improvements, $450,000, which I think that one as well as a carryover that was budgeted last year.
Jason, when you don't speak into the mic, I can't hear what you're saying. So like when you turn.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize.
That's okay. The water fund, as I mentioned earlier, these numbers will change. We'll get you some updated numbers, pulling that water tower number out. So that $9 million of expenses will come down, a good $4.4 million in the updated. And again, that projected working capital at the end of the year will be up another $4 million. As far as water rates, I know we mentioned that maybe in the future we might need to look at water rates, but for this upcoming budget, we're still $3.70 per thousand with a $16 minimum for the first 3,000 billed. No changes to water rates planned for this upcoming year. Major expenses, as I mentioned, water tower engineering 160, we'll pull that out. Utility costs did go up with the new green energy agreement. So we did see an increase in utility costs of $478,000 budgeted for the next year. Well, it's 5 and 6 improvements, nearly $1 million. East treatment plant transfer switch, $43,000 for the generator to be an automatic switch. And then, as I mentioned, the Chestnut, Locust, and Spruce water main. So this is the main portion. And then on the capital would be the redoing the streets. Then we have a $496,000 principal and interest debt payment due in the water fund. Vehicle and equipment fund, again, $1.1 million expenditure. I'll get into the things that make that up in a minute, but a lot of it you can see is just carryover items. We are buying some 3 new police explorers. The Public Works Ford Explorer was a carryover from last year, something that was in last year's budget carrying over. Same thing with the 5-yard dump truck that was carryover of the previous year. Public Works truck, bucket truck. I do have $200,000 currently in there for the police body cameras. We're looking at ways to which it might be $50,000 a year rather than just a $200,000 capital outlay. So once we get that kind of figured out which direction we're going with that, we'll update this number and change that to more reasonable. Upgrading the police department facility access system, $50,000. The leaf machine and leaf box, $80,000. A village-wide document management system to kind of scan and have everything electronic, $60,000. And then network activity monitoring for $80,000. And then just really quickly, some of the other smaller funds that I didn't have a slide on. Motor fuel tax, we're still budgeting money coming in at about $735,000. Operating budget, $217 for salt. We have some street lighting maintenance for $79,000 or some street lighting and then maintenance for $54,500. Route 31 TIF, I mentioned earlier, $750,000 coming out of there to establish the United TIF Fund. Within the United TIF Fund, we have some general TIF grants reimbursements, $110,000. Route 31 sidewalk, $60,000 or $150,000, sorry. And then other initiatives, $750 for kind of whatever comes up, purchasing properties or other initiatives.
So just for clarification, that is with the new TIF, since it's the first year, it's just starting to, whatever increment we're catching for the first year is just going into that fund. So what this is the remaining TIF that we had on Route 31, taking a portion of that fund balance and transferring it from one TIF to they're adjacent. So you're transferring from one TIF to the next one to establish a balance in case something comes up in the new TIF, then there's at least money in the fund to pay for those expenditures.
So the insurance fund, so this will pay the $320,000 for the liability insurance coverage and then $40,000 for any insurance claims. Tourism fund, hotel taxes, we're budgeting at about $85,000, 90% of which will be remitted to the Tourism Council. North Aurora Days, we have revenues of $80,000 versus expenditures of $90,000. SSA fund, no significant changes to that fund. The same thing with the sanitary sewer fund, no significant changes. We have some normal sewer and repair and maintenance plan for $126,000. The police pension debt service fund, principal of $515, interest of $119,700 on that bond. And then the police pension trust fund, no significant changes in that fund, just your normal pension benefits. So next meeting, we'll come back and I'll have some updated numbers for a lot of the changes I mentioned. And we'll have our official public hearing. And then on the cow agenda, we'll have any further comments, feedbacks, thing you guys want to see. And then we'll come back May 2nd to hopefully approve the budget. So I don't know if there's any other questions now.
No, budget looks good. Very good.
Good.
Why can't everybody be like us?
Okay. All right. Thank you. No exec session. Motion adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Have a good night.